bring glory to your name and help others with similar ailments. We love you and praise you in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. So today I'd like to talk to you a little bit about vitamin D. And vitamin D is a very interesting vitamin in that it's one of the fat-soluble vitamins that are available. And so it can become toxic. However, the interesting thing about that is that when we look around the world, more than 1 billion people, that's 1/6 of the entire Earth's population is vitamin D deficient. And when we look at America alone, we have numbers especially in the northern areas, up to 75% of all Americans are vitamin D deficient. So if we're looking at vitamin D, where do we get that? Vitamin D is predominantly from our ability internally to convert sunlight into a pre-hormone. And this pre-hormone has many functions inside of our body. One of the most common things that it does is it is a calcium modulator. So if we are having less bone density than we need, one of the things that we need to do is get out and get some sunlight. So the way that occurs is that when we get sunlight, it comes in contact with our skin, and it allows our skin to convert sunlight into cholecalciferol, which is a pre-hormone. Then it goes down to the liver and is converted again, and then it goes to, before it's even ready, it goes to the renal or to the kidneys and is ready again. Okay, now we can use it for lots of different things. Well, what happens if we don't have enough vitamin D? Some of the things that we're seeing is that many people who don't have enough vitamin D can have increased respiratory illnesses. We can see increased heart disease, increased kidney disease. One of the things that we call vitamin D is the happy vitamin, because if we don't have enough vitamin D, we can see mental disorders such as depression or sadness. As a matter of fact, they've named a illness called SAD, seasonal affective disorder, and that's from a lack of vitamin D. Okay. The other thing that we see is a lot more colds and flus from not having enough vitamin D. And one of the reasons for that is because vitamin D is also huge at modulating or preparing our immune system for any kind of illness or breakdown in our system. We see that that the vitamin D has an immune response in that it controls a lot of the calcium shuttling of so that when it comes to getting our calcium where it needs to be, that's part of vitamin D's role. As a matter of fact, when we see vitamin D go down, we see parathyroid function go up, which is also controls our calcium production. But if we don't have proper vitamin D, our muscles won't work right. And so many times we see sore muscles and things like that. We also see, because our heart uses calcium for communication, we see heart disease. We see respiratory illnesses. We also see our brain developments and things like that decrease. It also manages the ability for our blood calcium relationships to occur, and also how healthy our gut function is. So you can see that it's a big player. If we look at just a list of the benefits of vitamin D3, we're going to see that it controls cell formation. And if it controls cell formation, it also controls cell death. And one of the places that we see if we have cell death not occurring is cancer. And so we need that communication produced by the vitamin D to tell our cells when it's appropriate for them to die. And so it really plays a big role in our cancer. It plays a big role in our skin. It keeps our skin healthy, also our hair. One of the things that we do is we have enzymes and things like that that are produced by our pancreas, and vitamin D plays a big role in producing this function that the pancreas has. It also, because it's a hormone, it also has a big role in our reproductive health. It is one of those vitamins that helps to vasodilate and vasoconstrict. So it's important in our vascular system. It fights off colds and flus and things like that. So it is very important in our respiratory health. It also helps with our eye health, as well as athletic performance. So these are things that if you have enough vitamin D, it's going to provide calcium to all these different areas. It also has a big it's a big player in weight loss and sleep. As a matter of fact, there's been plenty of studies done that says when a person has enough vitamin D, then they have less sleep apnea. Okay, so we see that that there are several different places that we can get vitamin D, and most of those should be the sun. In my opinion, that's the best place to get it. There are foods that have vitamin D in it, and they are there just the same as we are an animal. So if we were to eat animal products, they would be in those animals. Now, that is one of my least favorite places to get vitamin D, because we can manufacture a better quality all by ourselves. If we are significantly low, then we may need to supplement, and that's not, again, that would probably be secondary to the getting out in the sun or having access to the UV rays that create this. So one of the things that I'd like to show you is I recommend that people get as much sun as they can, and that it's important if they're trying to get sun, but they live in a non-sun area. For instance, we're up in northern Idaho, and we don't get as much sun as Bakersfield, California, or we've got a lot more overcast. It's pleasant up here, but we just don't get quite as much. And so one of the things that we tend to use up here is a UV light bulb. And this is one that we use frequently up here. And I mean, if I was to, you can see that if I turn it on, it's very bright. And typically a person doesn't need much more exposure than about 10 to 15 minutes. Even if you were to do a half an hour or so of that, it would still be very beneficial for a person in a low light area, northern United States, to absorb this and prevent a lot of these ailments that might come upon a person. Now, one of the things that, especially in this day and age, that we're concerned about is disinfectant. And we know that when we're outside, we are getting a bombardment of UV rays. Now, the one that's the most beneficial for us is UVB rays. If we're exposed too long, it can actually be harmful also. So you don't want to be exposed too long. But one of the things we found is that I have a little device here, and it's called a germ reaper, and it produces that UV spectrum that kills germs. And you can simply turn it on, and when you do this, you can put it over any area that you want to kill germs. You can do this over a countertop. You can do this over your body. You can do this over your hands. Lots of different places where you want to sanitize something. That UV has an antimicrobial effect. And so, in addition to getting rid of or creating vitamin D, that UV ray also has an antimicrobial effect, and you can use it anywhere you like. I think this cost me probably $10 or something like that. Really inexpensive. These UV daylight bulbs, they're probably somewhere in the neighborhood of $50 to $75. So if you have a problem getting out to get as much light as what you would like, then I recommend that you get a UV bulb or a full spectrum bulb that allows you to get all of the daylight or the conversion of vitamin D from your skin. That's the way I would go if I was looking to get more vitamin D. Now, you can, and I recommend that if a person isn't feeling well or what have you, that they go and be tested. It's a really simple test. It's a blood test, and you can find out your vitamin D levels in a matter of a couple of days simply by having this blood test done. And typically, we're looking at somewhere between 30 to 80 units is within the normal range. Now, when I typically take these tests in my office, what I'm seeing is that almost everybody up here is at, if not below that line, they are at the bottom of it. We almost never see somebody who comes into this office and is sick that they are at the top of that range. They're almost always at the bottom. And so, because it's a fairly inexpensive test and easy to get, we recommend that people get it all the time. I mean, it just kind of gives us a baseline, and then we're able to follow them after that. So it is something that I would recommend for everybody who's listening to have themselves tested. There's even online testing companies who will send you out a kit, and maybe it'd be a blood spot as opposed to a blood draw. But these are pretty easy. There's I think that's most of what I had. Is there any questions? Do we have anybody who's might have a question?
Where does the vitamin D? Is it mostly plant-based or animal-based? If it's not
looking for it in a food source, it's mostly animal-based. Now, there are some cases where it's in funguses, but the funguses have to be exposed to UV light in order for them to have vitamin D3 in them. And so I usually sway people away from those because most of my practice is trying to get people to change their lifestyles and things like that. And we really don't want them to, go for a big hamburger when we're trying to, affect other areas in their life. So typically we're going to say, get outside more, and it'll take about 15 to 20% of exposed skin in order to get enough for about 15 minutes.
But if you're taking a pill, if you're taking a vitamin D,
if you're taking a pill, most of those are coming from the kosher ones are coming from a sheep lanolin, and so they're at least kosher. And that way, you're not worried about something not being against dietary laws and things like that.
But they do have plant-based vitamin D3.
They do. And that most of that is coming from the mushrooms. That's where we see it the most.
And
Okay.
you don't
Okay.
recommend it, right?
Excuse me?
You don't recommend it from the mushrooms because they're not grown in the sun.
Correct. It's
usually-
kind of an artificial infusion of vitamin D into them because, most mushrooms don't grow in sun. And so
Right.
when you infuse them, and, for me, myself, most mushrooms are growing on dead and decaying things. And so, I kind of stay away from them. That's not necessarily a biblical principle. It's just, my thought process.
Mhm.
Now, one of the things that we want to be aware of is that if we are planning to be out in the sun for a prolonged period of time, many people will put on sunscreen. Well, what does sunscreen do? Sunscreen blocks UV rays, right? And so if you put on sunscreen, especially the heavy duty stuff, it will block that UV ray and it will essentially stop the conversion of cholecalciferol into vitamin D. And we don't want that to happen. And as a matter of fact, some of the scientific studies say that because of that blockage, we have an increased amount of cancers. And so it's one of the things that I would probably, if you want to do something that's going to prevent sun exposure, I would probably do maybe a zinc oxide or something like that. It does have a complete blocking of that sun exposure, but I would say go out and get your sun exposure first. And then when you think it's going to be a little bit too much, then put on a hat, put on some protective clothing, maybe put a little bit of zinc oxide on your nose or cheeks or something so that it's not actually causing problems. The zinc is actually beneficial for you. But a lot of those other sunblocks are toxic. And so I'd probably shy away from those.
A few years ago, my daughter and I, we inadvertently did an experiment, not intentionally, but she loves fresh carrot juice. So she would just drink a lot of fresh carrot juice. And I think it's too sweet for me, so I just wasn't drinking it. Then we had to move. So we were both out in the sun for about 6 hours straight. She turned orange while we were outside. And then when we both went in, I turned red and she went back to normal. So,
right. So
it's almost like the carrot juice acted like a protection there too.
So you've got to understand that the carrot juice has a lot of keratin in it, and it's got a lot of melatonin precursors in it. And and this is important for somebody who has darker skin, the more melanin, the less conversion and exposure. And so a person who has dark skin will need to stay out in the sun longer than a person who has fair skin. And so, and so with that little experiment that you did, your daughter added keratin and melanin to her skin, and it reflected off those UV rays. And so she didn't get the skin damage or the skin infiltration that you got.
What I found is when I sunbathe before 10 o'clock, I never burn. But when I sunbathe between 10 and 4, I burn real quickly. I can't stand hardly being in the sun. But I just absorbed all that sun up till about 10.
The sun is always less harsh in the morning than it is in the afternoon. And so we typically will tell people don't sunbathe or get out and work past 2 o'clock. Because it's a little harsher then.
Okay.
Any other questions? I know Charmaine is waiting for us, so we're going to go to the kitchen as soon as she's done.
I didn't catch it first, so what was your name?
Dr. Mark Mead.
Okay. And I know you're up there where they are, so we're glad to meet you, and